up the coals. A touch of smoke is dancing through my clothes. Well, days gone by at the Seminole, where the cowpokes grow. Up in the mall, sitting among the stones. Sweetwater runs where the settlers drove. I close my eyes, adventure it takes hold. Living free, living bold, where the mountains meet the play. Honey, Wyoming, we can get away. Well, I'm gonna soak on the road to Yellowstone, where water's wet, Wind River and Big Hole.
This is Governor Matt Mead. Behind me you'll see beautiful Glendale Reservoir, and I'm standing in Glendale State Park. This is the 75th year that we celebrate our state parks, and it's important to do so because our past, present, and future are tied to our parks and historic sites. The state parks and historic sites and trails are unique to Wyoming, but their purpose, in fact, is universal. We think about recreation and family time, and most appropriate that we do so, because this is one of my favorite things to do, is spend time at our state parks with my family. But as we reflect on our history and how we can make better decisions in the future, we recognize that those who came before us, who had the foresight to create state parks, to recognize historic sites, historic trails, they have added to our culture and our history and our heritage. This is a time to say 75 years ago, people had the vision. They had the foresight to say, this is what Wyoming can be. It connects our past to our present and to our future. Those of us today should take that time to reflect and say, those decision makers in the past had great vision about all that Wyoming could be.
Those who came before, on the rocks they wrote, God made a bridge and the stream below. Miles and miles of trails in the snow. Well, Friday's here and off we go. Living free, living bold, where the mountains meet the clay. Honey, Wyoming, we can get away.
The old saying is, if you don't know your history, you're bound to repeat it. Wyoming has a colorful past. We have some past we're not too proud of. We have some past that we're very proud of. But nonetheless, all of those events eventually lead into connections that we can make with the past, events of the past, lessons that we can learn from the past that will lead us to make better decisions in the future.
Well, a historian, we always say, if you don't care much about your history, you don't care much about the future either, so I guess that's my philosophy. I just happen to be interested in what happened. So, you know, you got a record of 11,000 years of human habitation in the Bighorn Basin, and I think it's valuable.
You're supposed to teach your kids what you know. Tell them. And perform for them. If you're a dancer, put on your clothes. Dance with them, and they'll see you do them things, and then they'll follow you and talk to them what it's all about. That's what we got to do with these young ones.
My favorite president, Franklin Roosevelt, one of his most famous quotes and one of my favorite quotes, I think really comes into play right now, is the more we know about the past, the more prepared we are for the future. And I think if people took that to heart today and really understood, you know, what our ancestors could teach us, I think we could fix a lot of problems that we're having today in the country and even in the world.
We're talking about Wyoming being known as a pass-through state, and it very much has been a pass-through state. If we go back to the earliest times in Wyoming's history, the rivers were the means of transportation. The Indian tribes traveled the rivers Indian tribes came to Wyoming to get materials or to pass through Wyoming to trade with other Indian tribes.
I'm working on a collection here now that came from north of Rawlins. And, we got a lot of stone there. It came from down around Amarillo, Texas. And a lot of it came from the top of the Bighorns.
We've done archaeological digs in the canyon, and we have dug up some artifacts that date back about 9,000 years. So we know people were using the canyon. Those people would have been prehistoric folks coming up here probably for the same reason that Native Americans came up later on.
Like Sinks Canyon, there's nothing written down about our tribe. That's where our people used to camp and pick their different kind of roots for medicine. And there's nothing written down about that either.
There are also outcrops of chert in the canyon walls, and chert is the major stone that the Native Americans used to create their tools.
We've got enough chemical evidence now to pretty well trace these different kinds of stone. But, the mechanisms that were actually in operation, we don't really know too much about.
So we know that the Native Americans were here. We don't know very many stories about the Sinks itself from a Native American perspective.
Fish. Yeah, that's very important. Our people used to spear fish. They spear them with a spear. And then before going into Sundance, our old people, they said they eat fish before going into the Sundance.
People have always come up to the Sinks to see the river disappearing and then reappearing in the big pool filled with a big trout. South Pass City, the historic gold mining town up on the hill, when the gold fields played out, Lander, the valley where Lander is, was settled. And a lot of people came up to Sinks Canyon to see this phenomenon.
Wyoming's history, in my view, is a cause and effect history. No event happens in isolation. Women's suffrage, for example, didn't happen just out of the blue. There were several situations that took place that caused it to happen.
I also thought about in terms of where the state has come from, and what a wonderful thing. We were first in so many ways. Aren't we proud in Wyoming that we were the state, the first state, to give women the right to vote?
Esther Morris was a transplant basically from Illinois, came here with her second husband. He came to Wyoming as a miner for gold. South Pass City was a pretty new place in the middle 1860s. It had first been discovered by travelers on the Oregon Trail who had gone off the trail to hunt and so on. And those of the hunters who had some geographic and some geologic knowledge realized that that region was probably going to have some gold deposits. The California Gold Rush came along in 1848 and 49, and people kind of forgot about South Pass until the middle 1860s, and then came back to South Pass, and we had a mini kind of a gold rush in the middle 1860s to about 1880. Wyoming Territory had been established in 1868. It wasn't until 1869 actually that the government was put in place, and late in 1869 a call came out from the government to the various places of population in Wyoming to elect representatives to come to Cheyenne. Esther Morris was a 6 foot tall, 180-pound woman, pretty strong in her means. She had a tea party, I believe it was in September of 1869. She invited H.G. Nickerson, who was the Republican candidate, and William Bright, who was the Democratic candidate, to come to her cabin. She invited some of the influential people of South Pass City at that time to join. And when they were there, she had them stand up, and she asked that whichever one of them be elected, that they introduce a bill for women's suffrage. William Bright was elected, and then in December of 1869 introduced the bill. So very definitely a cause and effect situation there, bringing women's suffrage to the state of Wyoming. The state parks of Wyoming basically enhance or give visitors the opportunity to see two different kinds of things in Wyoming. One is natural beauty and the scenery and things such as that. The other is to give opportunity for our citizens and tourists who come to the state of Wyoming to view our history. The natural beauty portion on that side, we've had many dams built across the state. Probably the most significant are the number of dams that were built on the Platte River, starting with Seminole Dam and the Upper Platte just north of Saratoga, all the way down to Guernsey, which was built 1927.
Were we able to fight the federal government over the many reservoirs we have in Wyoming, which the Bureau of Reclamation had developed on usually a 50-year program for flood control and power generation and irrigation. We wanted recreation. It was not in the original mandate.
First of all, the Platte River, for probably the first 150 years of people being here, was a river that went 1.5 miles wide in April, May, maybe into June, to barely a trickle in October, November, maybe into December.
So we had real problems when we built a boat dock. If they drained the reservoir down in order to salt the canals over in Nebraska, our boat dock was high and dry. If they filled it after a while for flood control, we were inundated. So we had a lot of problems through the years to solve, and we solved those problems and enhanced all of the recreation areas.
Guernsey Dam, built in 1927, right before the Great Depression hit. Beginning in the early 1930s, the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps, boys who were working in the CCC built roads, they built bridges, they built campsites, they built a museum, they built a lookout point, and so there was a very close connection there between the federal government's trying to create jobs during the Great Depression and a need for hydroelectric power, controlling the river, and irrigation in Wyoming.
They've all enhanced over the things that we started, and yes, it's statewide now, and it's a big part of Wyoming's economy because much of it is recreation. People come in to see what we've got and use these facilities.
And so a lot of cause and effect relationships having to do with the dams and recreation and the hydroelectric power that's built in the state.
In celebration of 75 years of Wyoming State Parks, historic sites, and trails, take time to reflect upon what these trails, sites, and parks mean to you, to our state, and in fact to the country, because it ties us to our past. It helps us solidify our future. In Wyoming, where you find one blade of grass, you should leave two. That message is each generation has an opportunity and in fact a duty to improve upon what was provided to them to make a better place for the next generation. And as we see these historic sites, these trails, these state parks, that exactly is what was done by those generations who came before us.
No coffee pot is soaking up the cold.
This gives us an opportunity to help make better decisions today for those who come tomorrow. So I encourage you, as you celebrate with me 75 years of history, to get out by yourself or with your family and friends, enjoy the beauty, the recreation, and the opportunity, and also take time to reflect upon what this state means to you, what it could be, and those who came before us, and their thoughts in making this special place we call Wyoming.
Where the mountains meet the clay. Honey, Wyoming, we can get away. Well, I'm gonna soak on the road to Yellowstone, where water's wet, Wind River and Big Hole. Catch a glimpse of a buffalo grazing as he goes. Might wet my line, happy as a float. Major and Lance sitting at Glendo, an old gray dog and an 8-year-old, living free and living bold, where the mountains meet the clay. On a Wyoming weekend getaway. Where the mountains meet the clay, on a Wyoming weekend getaway. Let's all get away.